speech earlier on Tuesday, His Excellency the President reiterated that development cannot be achieved without peace and vice versa, and called for a debt for development projects approach, stressing the need to break the vicious circle of sovereign debts. And also he talked about the need to for reforms in the global financial system, and he talked also for the urgent need to activate and to boost African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the FTA, through backing supply chains among African countries and supporting the empowerment of African youth. With us now live over the phone is Dr. Ayman Ghoneim, and Dr. Ghoneim is an economic and legal expert. Dr. Ghoneim, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, sir. You're most welcome.
Dr. Ghoneim, so what were the highlights for you at the Africa-France Partnership Summit in Nairobi, Kenya?
Well, actually, it's obvious now that France is trying to diversify beyond the traditional Francophone Africa towards more of the Anglophone Africa and the Arab Africa. And this is part of the restructuring of the whole international economic scene. Because we have seen a few international crises during the last 4 to 5 years, starting from the COVID-19, which was an economic and health crisis, then the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022, which was a politically instigated economic crisis. And then we had the Israeli war on Gaza Strip and the present war in the Middle East, and all of them are both geopolitical and economic crises. We've also seen in 2025 the economic showdown between the U.S., China, and between the U.S. and its major trade partners, whether the European Union, India, Canada, and Latin America.
Yeah,
and
the tariff war.
Yeah, exactly. And throughout these crises, it's obvious that countries now, or major economic powers in the world, they are trying to diversify their economic partnerships. They are trying to build partnerships, especially with the developing countries. Of course, Africa is a growing continent. It's a growing market. It's 1.5 billion people. It's a traditional source of raw materials, of course, including the energy raw material like petroleum, natural gas, as well as minerals. You have uranium, you have phosphate, you have manganese, you have all the set of minerals are so rich in Africa. And Africa has been traditionally a market for the finished goods produced by the large economic powers. So now France is trying to move from the previous model of aid and influence, I may call it, to more of an economic partnership that's based on promoting bilateral trade, promoting investments, and investing in the future fields, mainly the green hydrogen,
yes,
the renewable energy, as well as financing the endeavors of the African countries to, first of all, revamp and improve their infrastructure, to build their industries, because many of the African countries now are trying to move towards industrialization. Instead of the old economic model of exporting raw material and importing finished goods, now they're trying to industrialize. And we have here a very successful cooperation model, which is the African-Chinese model. And I believe that now France is trying to learn from this model and trying to apply it. Actually, if you look, for example, to the bilateral trade between France and Africa during the last year, I think it was France exported around 29 billion euros to Africa, imported around 13 to 14 billion euros. This is not really a big number. If you look to the Chinese bilateral trade, it was 282 billion US dollars. And China actually, the economic partnership, the economic relations between China and Africa is a multifaceted relationship. It's based on investments, on finance, and investment and finance will bring about bilateral trade. China invests in Africa through its Belt and Road Initiative, through investing in African ports, in African infrastructure, providing finance in good and just terms. This brings about bilateral trade, and I believe that in the African-French summit, the French president talked about increasing the stock of the French foreign direct investment. Now, I think
in fact, Dr. Ghoneim,
yes.
In fact, Dr. Ghoneim, Mr. Macron seemed to be trying to lure Africa into more cooperation with France at the expense of the Chinese or the Americans. I mean, that was clear.
Well, actually, the African countries now are really playing it smartly. They are striking a balance between the East and the West. They are having, or they are trying to have balanced relationships between the Western countries, or the Western Hemisphere, of course, the U.S., North America, Western Europe, including Britain and France, and Germany, of course, and the Eastern Hemisphere, which is dominated by the BRICS, mainly Russia, India, and China. Here I would say that the African countries, they're trying to strike this balance, and Egypt, as a leading country, actually has given a very good example in striking such a balance. Egypt has balanced relationships,
yes.
And the political weight of Egypt helps its economic relationships, because actually politics and economy are two faces of the same coin. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has been expressing the voice of the South and the right of the people of the South to have finance in just terms and in easy terms, in order to improve their infrastructure, in order to build their industrial base. We've seen in the speech of President al-Sisi, he spoke about the need to address the sovereign debt crisis of the world. Actually,
yes.
It's not only for the developing countries, this is also for the developed countries. I think that the total sovereign debt in the world now, I think it even exceeded 110 trillion US dollars, and it's a major problem for the whole world. And of course, the debt is concentrated in the industrial countries, mainly, of course, the US and China. But the problem with the South is that their capabilities to service such debt is limited, especially with their dire need to improve their infrastructure and to empower their people, to induce economic empowerment into their policies. Here, the countries of the South will be so much inclined to increase their relationships with those powers that provide them with finance. Here, finance is a very important element in the whole game. And of course, the international financial scene, of course, is dominated by the international financial organizations or multilateral banks like the World Bank, of course, and IMF. But there are many attempts, and of course, these attempts are now, you can consider them as embryonic attempts. They are new attempts, but they are, I believe that in the coming decade, they may flourish and they may yield very good results. You have the Development Bank, which was established by the BRICS. You have the African Development Bank and African Export-Import Bank. And here, I believe that Africa has to work with its partners to increase the financial capabilities of these two African banks, because in Africa, for example, we have a problem that the intra-African trade is limited. I think it's in the vicinity of 11 to 15% of the whole international African trade, as compared, for example, to 50 to 60% of the intra-Asian trade, and 60 to
and more than that in
70%.
Europe, yeah, and
Yes,
more than that
60
even in
to-
Europe.
Yes, 60 to 70% in Europe. Yes.
Yes.
Of
Very
course,
important points you're mentioning, Dr. Ghoneim. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I just want to pose one more question to you. His Excellency, the President, met today in Kenya with the UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, and they, of course, talked about the global economy. They talked about Egypt's efforts and the mediators' efforts to bring about tranquility, peace, security, and stability to the region, and to mediate between the United States and Iran. And that war, of course, the U.S.-Israel war on Iran, and the situation in the Strait of Hormuz is really affecting the global economy, and especially poor countries like those who exist in Africa, suffering from high energy costs and a blockage in supply chains routes, and also, of course, food prices increasing because of the fertilizers also being much of the fertilizers around the world being transported through the blocked Strait of Hormuz. So the President warned again that peace, development cannot be achieved without peace, and that peace cannot be achieved without developments. And the President, along with the UN Secretary General, warned of the continuing negative repercussions of the U.S.-Israel-Iran war on the global economy, and especially on the poorer countries in the developing world. Do you see an end to that war? Do you see an end to the situation in the Strait of Hormuz? And how important will it be to have this thing solved quickly? Because the longer the situation remains as is, the more the suffering will be.
Well, actually, here I would refer the audience to the report that was published by the World Bank, which foresees that if the present conflict continues, then by the end of the year, the commodity prices around the world would increase by an average of 16%. The fertilizers would increase by an average of 31%. That's because natural gas is one of the main components, one of the main inputs in the fertilizers industry, and we know that the Arabian Gulf controls more than 20% of the world exports of oil, and more than 25% of the world exports of liquefied natural gas. So the increase in the natural gas prices would, as I said, increase the prices of fertilizers, as estimated by the World Bank, by 31%. And the World Bank also foresees or estimates that this will result that around 45 million people around the world would go into hunger. They would go
That's a big number. That's a huge
scarcity.
number. Yeah.
Yes, they would go into scarcity and food scarcity. And I believe that, of course, the expected inflation, which actually started now to materialize in the U.S. and Europe, I think it exceeded 3% in both. I think it maybe exceeds 3.3% in both the U.S. and Europe. And such inflation actually would or will continue in the future if the war continues, if the present conflict continues.
So finally, do you see that stubbornness between Washington and Tehran will continue, or do you think that leaner heads eventually will prevail? Because I mean, the world needs this war to end. Not just the developing world, by the way, the developed world and the Arab Gulf countries and everybody. So what do you think will happen?
Well, here I will quote the words of the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi when he actually expressed the voice of reason in the international politics. And that's why the Egyptian policy is highly respected worldwide, because we in Egypt, we represent the voice of reason, the voice of peace. And the president said that war has never solved any problem, that everybody pay the price of war, even those who are not engaged in the war. So everybody should participate in the mediation and should participate in the quest for peace, and that finally peace has to prevail for the good of mankind.
Indeed. Again, no peace without development, and no development without peace. The key words of the president there in Nairobi. No peace without development, and no development without peace. Thank you very much, Dr. Ayman Ghoneim, the economic and legal expert, for your time and your insight. And thank you for watching us, dear viewers, here on Newsroom. In 7 minutes from now, we'll be back with Nile News. Please don't go far.